My name is Alicia. I live with my mother in a small town. It has not always been easy, but my story is quite a peculiar one. 2 years ago, I had lost my father to a car accident. It was a very emotionally and mentally hard moment for me. It was just my mother and me. Honestly, at that point, I felt like my life was over. He didn't just leave my mother and I, he also left a debt of $20,000 which we had to pay. At this point, my mother, Natasha, was 45 years old, and the strain of adulthood had cramped her shoulders. She didn't go to university after high school. She had decided to marry my father. It wasn't the perfect decision, but they were in love, and it seemed like it was worth it. This love had made her choose to be a full housewife in charge of taking care of my father and myself. However, when my father died, we both knew that things had to change. We had to learn to fend for ourselves because nobody was going to do it for us. My mother soon began working as a babysitter. I found a part-time job as a waitress in a cafe. Now, this job allowed me to help my mother in the finances of the family, but it just wasn't enough. We had grown deep in debts, and fierce-looking men had begun to appear in our apartment from time to time. Similarly, they all threatened us and asked my mother to pay these debts as soon as she could. What were the consequences? I asked my mother once. She said, "They're gonna take you away from me." I cried because I didn't want to leave my mother. She begged with these men, but it was evident that the only solution to these problems was for my mother to pay the debts. My mother had to promise that she was going to pay for all the liabilities. One evening, I noticed that my mother dressed differently. She was in a revealing and sexy dress, and this immediately got my attention. I asked in surprise, "Where are you going, Mama?" Her reply came like a whisper, like she was hiding something from me. "Work," she said. "Where else will I go with all these, baby? I have to babysit. I'll see you later." And she was off. My mother left in those clothes. I believe she just wanted to dress that way so she could feel better about herself, as she used to be a pageant queen in school. This continued happening for a while, though, and every time it happened, she always came back early in the morning. I was worried, but I didn't know why I was worried. With these unpredictable movements, we began paying our debts gradually. Before I could fully understand what was happening, my mother had paid our debts in full. The men who used to come to threaten us no longer did, and it looked like things had suddenly changed for the better. In addition to this, she began buying expensive items like jewelry and clothes. These were things we could usually not afford. However, I noticed that in spite of the money and expensive items, my mother was sad most of the time. At a point, a group of women would come to our apartment and call my mother all sorts of names. I remember one of them calling her a whore. After a while, we had to move out somewhere else. After we changed places on a fateful evening, I saw my mother with a man holding hands. I was working at the cafe when my eyes caught them walking into a hotel across the street. The man seemed wealthy from his appearance. He was wearing a fashionable tuxedo and a luxurious watch. My mother, on the other hand, was dressed in a sexy short skirt. My curiosity was piqued. I lied to my manager that I was sick, hence I needed to take a break. He allowed me to leave work earlier, and I used this opportunity to follow my mother and the man in the tuxedo. Before they walked into the hotel, I could see him touching my mother's buttocks. This action infuriated me, and I was bent on following them until a security guard stopped me in my tracks. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything about my mother and the man. I then bought a camera and secretly taped it to my mother's bag before she left home the next night. She was unsuspecting, and this was good for me. After what seemed like forever, a video came in from my camera, and the video was my mama making out with a man. I was so embarrassed to watch it. When she arrived home early next morning, I asked her about it and even went ahead to show her the video. She became sad immediately and confessed everything to me. She explained that she had done everything she did out of love for me. She hugged me, and we both cried. Then she promised that she was no longer going to work as a prostitute. We had to move to a new town so that she could start her life again. Now she works as a cleaner in a supermarket. I feel despondent and happy at the same time. Despondent that she had to do that to feed me and make me happy, and content that she had stopped being a prostitute.